Hello, Mindset Monday. Hello, Collective. Hope you're doing well. Hope you've had a good weekend, and I wish you a great week ahead. I wanted to talk about this book because I'm in the middle of it at the moment, and I think that there's so many kind of powerful ways of thinking that might be helpful for you, for your own business, but also for your clients, and to be able to walk them through some of the think quite simple but tactical ways of helping people live from a future vision of where they are can actually help them make more progress in the moment because what it clears space for what's not useful and because you realize a little bit more what is more helpful or more important or more valued and important to the person. And in this book, there's a big shift that they talk about, which is Martin Seligman is kind of like the founder of positive psychology. And he says much of the history of psychology has been dominated by a framework in which people and animals are driven by the past. And what they're really talking about is determinism. So there's something happens and then we respond, but that's all based on past, like past behavior, past habits, all that kind of stuff. And what they're talking about in positive psychology in the 90s is proving the opposite of that, that actually we are pulled forward by our future. And this is called prospection, which is where we have like options or prospects in the future that we can live into. And so sometimes when we get clear on what we're doing, how we're doing it, but also the why we're doing it, and we get clearer on that why, we can more likely or more usefully aim towards like a better present because we're clearer on why we're actually doing it to achieve something. And most people are driven by fear or avoidance, 80%. And 20% are driven by approach and courage. So most people are actually more afraid of a negative future than a living into a bigger, scarier, kind of, or more testing, more difficult future to live into. And so it's always really helpful to create a future that they might be afraid of, because that might also drive behavior. So, for example, one of the questions you could ask is, if you were to live 100 more todays, what would the impact be on you, your family, your work, your performance, your life, your happiness, your health, your mobility, all that kind of stuff? I mean, that could be really scary for people. That's only 100 days. That's a third of a year. What if it was the next 10 years? Oh, right. Right. So some people are driven away by that kind of fear or avoidance. And so creating some of that in the future can be really helpful to trigger action. And humans act as we do based on a future we see for ourselves. And it's either a future we're trying to avoid or one we're trying to create. And I think I've done the same one, have I? Yeah, I've done the same one, but I wanted to talk about 50 Cent as well, because in his book with Robert Greene, they wrote a book about the laws of power. I just think this is so important. We're generally dealing with so many immediate battles that it's hard for us to lift our gaze above the moment. It is a law of power, however, that the further and deeper we contemplate the future, the greater our capacity to shape it to our desires. And so again, so often we are reacting today, not proactively thinking about the future and working towards that. And so we're at the mercy of temporary dopamine, all this kind of urgent, what feels urgent to our body, but actually isn't taking us to anywhere useful. And I can't remember who it is that says it, but it's like whatever society or the majority does run in the opposite direction. And I mean, most people operate day to day, week to week. Um, the really successful people, and there's a video of Jeff Bezos I watched recently, the former CEO of Amazon, and he is talking about quarters, so 90-day periods in the next 3 to 5 years. So he's living that much into the future. So that's a law of power. He's not even thinking about today. He hires people for today's stuff. And it's just an invitation to think about how might we create more space for you and your clients to think about the future so that that becomes what takes our attention, time, and energy, not the present, what feels important or urgent, but isn't actually taking us to somewhere that we think is important. And so we've not evolved to think years or decades into the future because we would not have lived past roughly, even in the 1800s, we wouldn't have lived past, I think it's like 40. So thinking about 50s and 60s and 70s, how we want to be at that time, we literally don't have the capacity to think about it. So this is why it's so helpful to create the space for people to imagine and kind of playfully imagine what that might look like and how they might work towards that in the short term. And even day to day, thinking, what is it? Chris Williamson says, what would my future tomorrow self, what would I can't remember. Look it up. Great quote. And so here's a couple of things that might just be helpful invitations to start with, both for yourself and your clients. Start with what you want. And again, it doesn't come naturally to us to think about these kind of things, but work backwards from there. So think and act from the goal rather than toward the goal. So start in that future. And I mean, Lenny has really helpful kind of templates for tracking back 90-day goals, 45-day outcomes, this kind of thing that tracks back to what do I need to do today. So starting from what you want and working backwards is much better. Acting from the goal, not towards the goal. Towards the goal, you're going to encounter resistance and friction. From the goal, you see it and experience it very differently. And the clearer you are on where you want to go, the less distracted you'll be by endless options. So again, it's the same for your clients. How can you help them get so clear on where they want to go? There's no room for distraction. There's no room or even want to be distracted because of that clarity. And so it takes me back to Elvis the other day. He was in his bed, and one of the examples from this is he comes home. The guy is Benjamin Hardy. He comes home after a busy day of work, and he's greeted by, like, it's a really stressful day, and he's trying to think, how do I want to be when I go into the house to my kids? And he thinks about 20 years in the future. What would that version of him do in this moment? So I thought about this for myself going home to Elvis one day. In 20 years, Elvis won't be alive. So knowing that in my future that I would miss him changed how I experienced him in the present. So it makes me so much more present. And again, I would offer you as an invitation for you today. I mean, the moment you have in front of you, your 20-year in the future self would really want it. Really, really want it. I was going to say would kill for it, but I didn't want to say that. So how might you use that to experience more of what's in front of you as well? So some kind of tactical things, a vision of what you want, then creates your identity and adjusts your identity to match towards that. And then that changes your behavior and thoughts. And again, it's the same for your clients. When they get clear on what they want, their identity will need to adjust. What will I need to be the same or do more of? And what do I need to, how might I need to be different? Like any statement like, oh, I'm not that type of person, that's an adjustment in identity that needs to happen for that vision to happen. And being able to listen to catch those is really powerful to help people, again, change towards it. And then the behaviors and thoughts. What thoughts might need to change? What behaviors might need to change in the meantime? And these are just a couple of, like, I'm just throwing these at you. If you think that this is interesting, I'll dig into it next week in the Mindset Monday as well. So if you think about it, a really good frame that I use for thinking about somebody's performance is potential minus interference. Anything that interferes with our potential is going to decrease our performance. So this is interference, some of these threats. Without hope in your future, so if it's not better than the present, your present will lose meaning. So if there's nothing better to strive for, what am I bothered with in the moment? A reactive narrative rather than a proactive one that you've created narrative about your past stunts your future. For example, if you've experienced a negative situation, a painful situation, a challenging situation, and the reactive narrative you've told is, I'm just making this up. I deserve it. I'm not good enough. I couldn't do anything better. It was all I could do at the time, whatever. That's going to limit your future versus if you proactively tell a narrative like, I appreciate what happened because I learned. I appreciate what happened because I became this type of person that I appreciate or I grew from this experience because. So instead of something like PTSD, you get post-traumatic growth. And that's super powerful for, again, equipping you for the future and your clients. What stories are they telling about the past that is limiting what they think they're capable of in the future? Your environment creates a massive influence on your performance, and that creates random evolution rather than, again, intentional evolution. So if you intentionally want to evolve, you don't surround yourself with people doing whatever. You'll be intentional. For example, I want to be a better keynote speaker. So I'm going to put myself in environments where that's the thing. That's who people are. It's not random then, it's a little bit more intentional. Being disconnected from your future leads to myopic or just kind of haphazard decisions. So when we connect to our future self by creating that vision of what we want for it, well, then that leads to clearer decision making in the present. Urgent battles and small goals keep you stuck. And again, we can see this playing out in both ourselves and other people. If you don't, so it's easy to spectate and watch life happen and judge other people for it. And again, your clients may do this as well. But the people that are failing, the people that are trying, the people that are doing this stuff are the ones that are actually winning because they're getting data, they're getting feedback, they're updating the behavior, they're experimenting, they're learning, they're adjusting. If we're not in the arena, if we're not even trying, we are failing by default. We're not even in the thing to get the success. And then success is often the catalyst for failure because when you succeed, you typically have a wider radar of options and you get wider options given to you or offered to you. And so that can often overwhelm us and we get lost in that because we've lost a clarity of what we're working towards. And so success can often be something that actually causes us to move backwards. Truths about your future self, your future drives your present. So anything we want to do, for example, if I was hungry right now, fed Philip in the future wants to eat in the present, right? So your future drives your present. Your future self is different than you expect. We think if we think back 10 years in the past, how much we've changed to today. But there's a thing called the end of history illusion. That 10 years, we actually can't even predict that 10 years into the future. We think our 10-year in the future self won't be that different from today, but it's very different than you expect, your future self. Your future self is the Pied Piper. So what I think this means, because I haven't gotten that far in the book, is that when we get clear on it, it kind of leaves trails along the way for us to move towards. The more vivid and detailed your future self, the faster you'll make progress because there's clarity that helps decision making and not be haphazard. It's a clear decision. Failing as your future self is better than succeeding as your current self. So, I mean, your future self might be bigger and broader and making more impact and all that kind of stuff. So failing at that might be out of 1,000, you're going to fail at 10%. But that 10%, if we're limiting our present self, might only be like a 1%. I'm just making stuff up, but hopefully that makes sense. Success is achieved by being true to that future self so that there's no regrets, there's no kind of things that cause us discomfort in the present. I don't really, again, I haven't gotten to this one. You view God impacts your future self. Let's ignore that and skip forward. So future self steps. Clarify your contextual purpose. So contextual is to you, not to other people and what's important to them. Eliminate lesser goals. So anything that doesn't take you towards that purpose or aligns with that purpose, remove it. Elevate from needing. So I need 10 clients, I need whatever, to wanting them, to knowing I'll get them. That's quite different. Ask for exactly what you want. If you don't ask for what you want, you might just get what you get. Automate and systemize your future self. So if there's no time in your calendar for acting towards what you want on that future self, there's no time in the present for it. So you're not going to achieve it. Schedule it, so put it in your calendar, and then aggressively complete imperfect work. So work will never be perfect. So just aggressively complete it. Do whatever it needs to happen. And then it's what can you experiment? So based on what I've talked about, how might you test some of this for yourself, for your clients? What might you pay attention to or notice? And hopefully in the next Mindset Monday, if it's interesting, what I might do is dig into the threats, dig into the truths, and a little bit more about some of the steps that you can take with a little bit more detail. Hopefully helpful. Much love. I wish you a great week ahead, and I'll speak to you soon.